I hear a current, or maybe it's just an undercurrent of hope in the midst of this COVID crisis. People are starting to imagine how we might emerge from this and how things might be better. Read some wonderful articles in the New York Times, trying to imagine a more just world, kind of massive structural changes that would be required of our nation in order to reach that. But it's no more radical than anything FDR wanted to do. It does seek greater justice, greater flourishing for all individuals in a society. Truthfully, we're all better off if we do it. It seems like it's almost within our grasp, but I'm worried. Because I really don't think that we have the spiritual and moral, architecture or infrastructure to be able to get the job done. Because when you make the kind of changes that we're imagining making to make a more just and healthy world, well, there's going to be resistance to that. Huge resistance. Resistance internally to the changes that it will require for each one of us, and resistance of the structures that are in place in our country right now. And it's going to take more than just kind of a general notion that it would be nice to have a more just and equitable world in order to get by that sense of resistance that will be there. No, the desire for a more just and healthy world will have to be grounded in life's purpose, in why I'm here and why my life matters. That's what it'll take. That's normally been the purview of religion. But let's face it, religion is kind of a joke these days. And it probably should be. I was in touch with an old high school friend on Facebook in the last couple of weeks. Invited him to be part of our Sunday gathering if he'd like. And he said, Sam, I would, but I'd be afraid I'd burn. Afraid I'd burn. It really ticks me off. He doesn't tick me off, you understand. Right? He was always a nice guy. I'm sure he's a nice guy now. No, what ticks me off is the feckless church that at this crisis moment, at the moment when things can move and change, at the moment when we most need a sense of the presence of, creative urgency and love, it gives us magical language and silly ideas that we thought up 2,000 years ago. Jesus died for our sins. If we believe it, well, then we'll go to heaven. We thought that up when we thought there was a dome over the flat earth and heaven was up there. We don't think that anymore. We thought that up when we thought blood has magical properties, and we don't think that anymore. So why are we focusing on believing these things that seem so far out of our current worldview and comprehension? Now, not all churches are like that, I know. Some churches seem to be there to sort of support each other in the life that they're living so that they can live longer and more comfortable lives. That seems to be the goal more often than not. And yeah, they do lots of nice things for people, and I'm really glad to be part of a church that is nicer rather than crueler. But it's not going to get the job done now. The God you don't believe in doesn't exist. There's no point in praying to a God up there who, sort of capriciously decides to heal one person and not heal another person. No point in making deals with that God. No point in blaming that God for all the suffering in the world. There's really no point in thinking that one religion or another religion is going to be better off because that God likes it better. There's no God like that up there. The God you don't believe in doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some creative urgency, some evolutionary impulse, some creative drive of love that isn't unfolding in this universe and that we can't know in ways that have nothing to do with our five senses. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm just dead wrong about that? That there isn't any such God, that there isn't any way to connect and be formed by such a love? Well, then you can probably turn this video off right now, and that's okay with me. The social and the forces in our culture are moving people to ignore such a message. I guess that may be the way it is. Of course, there's another group of you who may be thinking that I should be struck down by a lightning bolt right now for what I've said. And you should probably stop watching too, because I'm not saying what I'm saying to tick you off. I'm saying what I'm saying to begin to articulate a vision that is beyond the magical God, dealing with reality. Because I really believe that people need to be connected, grounded in that kind of formation if we're going to be able to turn this world around. So if you're still with me, I'll tell you what I think needs to happen. We need faith communities to develop. I'm going to call them integral faith communities. For those of you who know something about Ken Wilber, you may get a sense of where I'm going with this, but it doesn't matter. The first thing our faith communities need to be able to do is to provide some sort of a structured spiritual path, a way for people to connect to the presence of God, let's call it evolutionary impulse, the universe, whatever. Some way to connect and some way to look at the self in that context and begin to focus on development and growth. A concrete spiritual path. We also need communities that allow people to wrestle out what I'd call an intelligible faith, a way of describing their religious sensibilities, the ground that's going to give them that sense of purpose. And that's not easy because all of the traditions that we have were brought up in this magical world frame, and they were pointing at something from within their own worldview. And right now we have to do the hard work of wrestling out how we want to understand that in our given worldview. And those communities also need to be what I call accountable communities. That is to say that they are there to support the people in the community as they grow and develop, but also expect growth and development from the people that are there. And finally, they need to be communities of service. Because if we're connecting to the presence, to the evolutionary impulse, to the creative urgency, we are doing it for a purpose, and the purpose is to turn this world around. Concrete spiritual path, working to develop an intelligible faith in an accountable community that serves the world and seeks to make it a more just and equitable place. That's what I believe we need right now. It's a hard sell, but can you help me sell it? If you're interested, I'm doing some of that now. There are lots of people out there who are starting to get this message out, that there is something more beyond our senses that we need to attend to and be formed from. I'm doing part of that on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'd like you to be a part of it if you'd like to be. There'll be a slide at the end of this video that gives you the Zoom meeting credentials and so on to get there. I'm hoping you can be part of it because what we do during that hour on Sunday morning is focus on who we are and the things we might like to change about ourselves so that we can flourish and express the creative urgency and love of God more effectively. We do so in the context of a God that is all about loving us, not destroying us. Then we wrestle a bit with the older context, the language of the scriptures, which was developed in a different worldview. And we begin to ask what it might be for us to understand what direction they were pointing. There's nothing magic about the Christian tradition. It's mine. It's the one I use to try and discern. If there's another that seems better for you, that you can dig down deep and let it form your character and your sense of how to express love, that's great with me. We do that, and then we open to a time where we simply connect with spirit, which are lots of ways to do that, you know. It's not all about traditional prayer, and it's not even all about meditation. There's a lot of ways to begin to develop that sense of presence beyond our senses. Then we try and get together and just get to know each other some. If you'd like to be part of that, I'd love to have you. If you're enjoying being part of that, I'd love for you to invite lots of other people. Because if we're going to get hold of that current of hope and make something happen from it, we're going to need to ground our desire for an equitable and just society, one where people can flourish. We're going to need to ground it in a connection to the divine, to the evolutionary impulse, the creative urgency, to the love of God that leads us and guides us.